Russian invasion of Ukraine happened, they formed the Ukraine Foreign Legion. All the governments got together. They said, you can go. The governments were helping finance it, and thousands of people from Europe and North America went to fight for Ukraine.
Yeah.
And they were given free rides
Heroes.
there and back.
Heroes.
Yeah,
They were regular heroes.
Ukraine said that they'll pay for all of their medical attention if they get hurt. They'll pay for their... if they died, they were going to pay for them to have their corpse flown back to their families.
Yeah.
The Foreign Legion, and they got passports for Ukraine. So much stuff.
And Zelensky can come here and ask for $4 billion shamelessly.
Yeah. And then, all the governments were in on it. So it's the hypocrisy is insane. Yeah. One country invades Ukraine, totally okay to support it. Another country invades, the occupied lands of Palestine. It's just like night and day hypocrisy.
Send people from all over the world to fight for the diaper soldiers because the diaper soldiers can't fight. Yeah, they're urinating on themselves and they're defecating on themselves. Did you see the one of them? The interview what he gave, he says he urinates on himself at night. He can't sleep. That's the punishment of Allah. That's the punishment of Allah. You haven't seen anything yet. You haven't seen the punishment of Allah come down upon you. See, and they've gotten to the point where they actually feel that the power they have is them. They've become so arrogant, they've become like Pharaoh. They believe they are gods walking on earth and everybody else is beneath them. And most of this sickness is derived from the Talmud. And of course, we are never talking about Jews. We have to say this. We have to be clear. We're talking about Zionists. Zionist is an entity that is secular, that has nothing to do with the religion of Judaism. The people of Torah are our brothers and sisters. So we're not talking about those. We're talking about somebody that has a nationalistic ideology called Zionism. And if Zionism is an ideology that means oppress, kill, exile, and do whatever that is evil to a people, we're going to have to talk about it, plain and simple. So they become like Pharaoh, gods on earth. They can't be touched. I mean, when a rabbi sits and he talks, a Zionist rabbi sits and talks and says that the people, the Palestinian people want to be slaved. Don't you understand? They want to be our slaves. They're going to be happy by being our slaves.
Hey, who is this?
This is a rabbi, a Zionist rabbi. I have some of the stuff in my posted in my TikTok. So when you have that, what do you expect from a people to behave? They fooled themselves to think that they are so powerful and that they are lasted this long and they've defeated militaries and they feed them all this garbage. First of all, if it wasn't for the United States, who has fought most of your wars, England, who has supplied you with everything and fought some of your wars, and Germany, France, you wouldn't be anything. Your nuclear program came from France. All your weapons and your money comes from the United States and England. Germany just recently, I don't know, the last 20, 30 years, stopped paying you reparations. All your buses and everything else was coming from Germany. So how you didn't do it yourself, and now you're fighting, you're causing a genocide, fighting against an armed resistance that has, other than AK-47's homemade rockets, and you can't even do it. You need somebody else to come fight for you.
Yeah, and now the numbers are getting pretty crazy about how many of them are visiting hospitals and how many of them are actually injured and killed.
Did you see
they're trying to hide the numbers.
Said they're hiding, they're lying. There's a lot of dead soldiers out here and blah, blah, blah.
That's why the recruitment. They need all those recruitments from other countries too.
And we still have people talking about people still bringing up this crap about stuff that has been already debunked over and over. The babies, debunked. The
1,200
debunked. The number. Then we also have the videos of the Apache helicopters murdering their own people. Then we have a tank. Now the latest.
Do you know about the Hannibal Directive?
Yeah.
So the Israelis have this program called the Hannibal Directive that basically is a green light for their own army to kill their own Israeli citizens. So in the event that they don't, to prevent them from being captured.
Yeah. But the Hannibal Directive is only for soldiers, not for civilians. But they murdered civilians doing it. Wow. They're not supposed to do it against civilians. Now it has come out that they were doing it against civilians. So for instance, if a Hamas fighter has an Israeli soldier with him right here, then they are directed to take both of them out. But if it's a civilian, they're not directed to take, but they did it anyways. Now there's video out that was released by the Israeli government. And the crazy part about this, all the stuff I'm saying has come out in Israeli
newspaper.
News. Yeah, Haaretz. And there's also an article just broke from a news organization called Can 11, KAN 11. In that, there was an individual by the name of Nico, after October 7th, immediately after, who said he saw 28 of his friends and family members that were murdered by the resistance. Now it's come out that all the names he gave are alive and well in so-called Israel. They were nowhere near this concert or the area. So you see, all this stuff is being debunked, and you still have Zionists to get on and repeat the same stuff over and over again. You're dealing with a people who want a narrative that is full of nonsense and lies and fabrications.
And they double down. They're not ashamed to, because they have to keep going with it. No. The whole thing is, when Douglas Murray was talking to Cenk Uygur, and that Douglas Murray guy pisses me off.
I hate him.
He's so snobby.
I can't stand it.
But he's like, if Israel wanted to, they could have been doing. It's not a genocide. If they wanted to, they could have dropped a nuclear. Like, so simplistic. They could have dropped a nuclear bomb on them and wiped them out. So there's not a genocide. If they wanted to, they actually have mercy.
They dropped the equivalent of 2 nuclear bombs on them, without dropping the actual radiation.
So that's how they play with games, though, without the exact radiation. But the damage is very, very similar. Yeah. But they keep saying that same thing, those narratives. But one thing I notice about them when I'm watching them is there's 2 things. Number one, they just continue as if nobody's debunking anything. Exactly. They just keep going.
But that's what I'm trying
to
tell
you. They have no shame.
Listen. So one of their directives for the Hasbara. So the Israeli government has this program called Hasbara. It's a Hebrew word, and it literally means explaining, but it's part of their propaganda network. And they have hundreds and thousands of people that are part of this propaganda network. And they openly say it's the time it takes for someone to debunk it, to do the research, to get the message out. By the time they do that, you're tying up resources for the enemy. So it's easier to just keep lying and keep going, because it's easier to spread 100 lies in the time it takes for them to debunk 1 lie.
Wow.
And
shayateen, bro.
And not just that, their tactic, if you pay attention to it, it's always the same. It's put you on the defensive, and we'll never get anywhere. As soon as you debunk something, as soon as you say something about the babies, condemn Hamas, one after the other, as soon as you finish, you'll never get a chance to deal with him.
What's the most clever thing that they started right now that completely derailed the news of Gaza and Palestine off the news? The whole Harvard and all the colleges that are supposedly doing or calling for genocide, and they held congressional hearings, calling the leaders of each of these colleges, like Harvard and Penn. And they completely changed the narrative just by saying that, there's people who are calling for the genocide of all Jews, and there may have been a couple incidents here and there, but the majority of Zionists or Jews in general in these colleges are completely fine, and they're not complaining at all.
But they don't care. By the time you debunk that, they've already spread a dozen other lies.
Well, the thing they're using now is this thing. They come up with different things at different times. The thing they're using now is, you're saying the river to the sea. That means wipe us out. Wait a minute. First of all, you started that saying the river to the sea. And as a matter of fact, for the most liberal Zionists, the 2 lines on the flag, those are 2 waters. Some use it as the Mediterranean to the Jordan, And Netanyahu's father was more than that, including Netanyahu when he showed the picture of Greater Israel recently when he gave that speech.
In the
he had
UN.
the map in front of him at the UN. So you're saying that is the Nile at the bottom and the Euphrates at the top. And everything in between that to be Jewish and nothing else. Zionist Jews. Okay, so you are the one who started from the river to the sea. But our river to the sea is totally different than your river to the sea. And what I mean by that is when a Palestinian Muslim says from the river to the sea, he means Palestinian Jews, Palestinian Muslims, and Palestinian Christians. When you say from the river to the sea, you're saying Zionist Jews, everybody else out. That's the difference. Big difference.
A very big difference.
So one is actually a genocide. Your way of saying it is genocide, but not my way.
So, quick question. I want to kind of loop back to one thing that Brother Imad said, is that when you have the Houthis, right, and they are putting this pressure on the trade, how do you think that's going to affect the Israeli economy?
Oh,
I mean, we already know it's...
Oh, it has affected. It has crushed it. It has crushed it till the traders in the Gulf countries, not all of them, UAE, I think, did it. Bahrain and Saudi and the Jordanian government. They allowed shipments to go up, but it crushed them. It showed the port of Eilat empty with nothing in it. Nothing in it. So they actually, look, a small group of Houthis, what they did. Small group of people, poor people. The Yemeni people are forget their beliefs. If you know Yemenis, they're very hospitable people.
And Yemen is one of the poorest countries
One
in
of
the
the
region,
poorest
right?
countries in the region. Look at them. Imagine if there was movement from one more place.
No, imagine if Erdogan and Azerbaijan and the pipelines. What if there was some even a threat of a freeze there? Imagine what would happen. It would be astronomical compared to what the Houthis are doing.
Yes.
What the Houthis are doing absolutely nothing.
Explain that pipeline. What pipeline?
So the Azerbaijan pipeline, which runs through Israel, and Israel gets their oil from Azerbaijan, and it's Erdogan which is responsible for that pipeline. Turkey is responsible for that pipeline, and if I'm not mistaken, Erdogan has 100 or I think 90% control of that pipeline, right?
Yeah.
So wait,
And
one
where the
second. I
funds?
just want to correct one thing. You said that it runs through Israel, but I think you mean it runs through Turkey, right?
Turkey, but Israel benefits through it. Basically.
it
They're
goes
beneficiary.
so it's Azerbaijan, Turkey, then Israel.
Yes, they're beneficiaries of it.
Yes.
Major beneficiaries of it, right? And that. So what I'm trying to say is, what the Houthis are. This is why it's shameless. Like what the Houthis are doing is not even a touch compared to that. It's absolutely nothing.
Yeah. So,
And they're able to have this stranglehold because the region that passes right through Yemen, the Bab al-Mandab, right? It's like 30 kilometers, right?
the port of Aden. Yeah.
So the port of Aden goes through most of South Yemen. It's like parallel.
Yeah.
Then there's a small little turn, almost like a little elbow.
Yeah.
And that section is like 30 kilometers wide. And it's very small, very narrow. And that's at the bottom left-hand corner of Yemen. So they have almost total control over that. You can, 30 kilometers is nothing. And even if, so I read a report that even with like the cheapest drones, which are like $2,000-$3,000, they can reach the other side. So they have a very tight hold on that.
That's the opening to the Red Sea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then this coalition that the United States is trying to put together, they're using anti-ballistic missiles that cost $11 million, $12 million. So a lot of people, a lot of analysts are saying like, this is not a sustainable coalition. You're going to be spending $11, $12 million to shoot down a $2,000 drone that's could easily be made in like, some little factory, even if it's in the poorest country of the world. Like,
It's ridiculous.
so, and these ships that you're, keeping in the Red Sea or in the Gulf of Aden, they need to be supplied. Those people need to be fed. Those ships need diesel. It's expensive to maintain these ships in that region, and it's a hostile region. So the logistics just do not match up, and that's why countries are dropping out.
Yeah.
And then did you guys hear about Malaysia?
What about Malaysia?
Yeah, Malaysia did. They cut off maritime access to Israeli ships in their waters, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Malaysia.
Done that long.
yeah, so, I mean, there's not.
Better late
The
than
Israelis were laughing, saying, "Oh, we don't even bring many of our ships over there." So it's like,
For
saying
me,
that
it's interesting because I haven't heard Malaysia in the news in a long time.
It's more than what other countries did.
Exactly.
You know,
But, so they're
it's
laughing,
not-
but I think that's propaganda because Malaysia and Indonesia, they straddle the Straits of Malacca. I think that's how you pronounce it. I don't know exactly. But that's one of the most important shipping lanes in the world.
Is it really?
Yeah. So when you try to go from China, most of the stuff that comes to, let's say, the Indian Ocean from China goes through Indonesia, Malaysia, that region of waters. So if Malaysia and, let's say, for example, in the future, Indonesia jump on board too, and they say you can't dock here, all of those Israeli container ships that are owned by Zim Corporation, which is one of the biggest companies in Israel, where are they going to refuel? Even if those things are not coming to Israel, Zim is a major corporation that has hundreds and thousands of, I don't know, shipping containers and hundreds of ships. And they're in the shipping business. So if you're shipping all around the world, you need ports all around the world. And if all of a sudden countries start closing off and saying, hey, you can't refuel with us, that's going to throw off your entire shipping industry.
the Indonesian hospital in Gaza. You remember when there were talks about the IDF bombing it? That hospital was funded by Indonesian people. It wasn't a government initiative. It was every average Indonesian who could give whatever they can. So when you had those doctors coming on Instagram and explaining hey, there's no Hamas here. This is our plan. This is our blueprint of our building. This is what our objectives are, mission. There's no Hamas here. There's no military operations being conducted from our building. They're wearing these badges that are given to anyone who donated to building that hospital. And so all across Indonesia, you'll see people who wear that badge with pride because they have so much pride in that they were able to construct this hospital in Gaza with their own crowdsourced fund. It's a beautiful objective that these just ordinary citizens of Indonesia just said, hey, we're going to do something about it, even though our government didn't do anything. But this time, it looks like the government made some kind of initiative where they're going to be preventing Israeli vessels from coming in.
Wow.
So
I didn't know that about the
people,
Indonesian
man.
hospital.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
I had no idea. I always thought that was an Indonesian government thing.
So I think it's really interesting that, you have this very poor country, Yemen, and they took a step and they stood up, and the entire world is like saying that this is a genocide, the UN resolution. So it's not like they're acting outside of law. They're not pirates. They're setting up an economic blockade. And then they took the first step. They had the courage to do it. And now Malaysia closed their ports too. And then you could see a chain effect happening. And if, even one other country closes their ports, that can have to Israeli shipping, that could have a huge, huge effect.
And this is what I'm talking about, Shaz. Like, remember, even when we're going through MEC and all these other places, the governments and the powers that we expected were supposed to make a move because they have power and they have more grandeur. Like, what's Yemen in front of them? What's Malaysia in front of them? Nobody hears about Malaysia. But it's coming from these places, the movements and changes that occur. And we, as human beings, we're going to continue. This is going to continue happening. It's not a bad thing, but we're never going to be, if we have the right glasses on, the right lenses on, we're never going to be in a situation where, Allah never ceases to amaze us. Allah always is going to be in a position where we're always amazed by Allah, where we think that we have our eyes set on these powers, the Saudis and the Emirates and this and that, the Turkeys, the bigger countries. And then you have like the Houthis that are making an effect. Yeah. You have the Malaysians that nobody hears about. Malaysians' economy is pretty strong. I think in like the 2000s, the early 2000s, they had one of the strongest economies in the world. But regardless, you never hear them in the world arena.
Small country.
Right? Small country. Small islands here and there. But, the changes come from places that you never expect, man.